Experience work interactions in a different and refreshing light. This is the Leader in You podcast, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. We bring the science of attachment and emotional connection with insight from the last 20 years to share how you can overcome conflict issues at work and build strong team relationships, as well as the connected culture.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to EMC Leaders Podcast, The Leader in You. My name is Polina, and I am so excited to be co-hosting. Well, first of all, I'm excited to be back, and I'm also very excited to be co-hosting this podcast with my amazing mom, Dr. Lola Gershfeld.
Polina, I'm so happy you're here. I was suffering without you. I'm like telling everybody, Polina is on vacation. She's moving from Hawaii to California. And I can't wait for her to come back. So I'm glad you're back.
Oh, thank you, Mom. I'm excited to be here. I love doing these podcasts. Yeah, it's been so crazy the last few weeks. And I was like very overwhelmed. But you know what? I like this because it kind of steps me away from like being in the overwhelmed. And I get to just like shift my mindset to, connecting with you and sharing the stuff that we absolutely love to talk about. But we're really excited today to have a special guest with us, Dr. Alaina Szlachta. Did I say that right?
You sure did. And
Yes.
Thank you for asking.
Welcome, Alaina. We're so excited to have you here. And I know my mom was the one who connected with you. So we're just eager and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, you're inspiring me to consider doing a mother-daughter podcast myself. I don't know what we would talk about because our expertises are totally different, but we just got back from a trip to Italy together. And so I think we would do a really fun mother-daughter combo thing. So thank you for the inspiration.
Oh, I love that. Actually, I have 5 kids. I don't know if my mom told you, but my oldest daughter, Ellie, is 16 years old. And after I started doing the podcast with my mom, I was telling her the same thing. I was like, that would be fun to just like do a podcast with all the kids. We have a social media account and stuff that we run, but it would be fun to just like sit down, do podcasts. Like I just love the mother-daughter and the connection there. And even when we were at the ATD conference, we had shared with some of the attendees that we were a mother-daughter duo, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm so inspired! It's so sweet."
You're going to have to do a plug for what you guys do because there's no way that the two of you could be related and that you, Polina, could have a 16-year-old. I mean, yeah, what are the creams? What are the exercise and diet regimens? Like, we all are dying to know. So you have to put that in the show notes if you will.
Thank you. I actually have an 18-year-old as well, and he's like 6 feet tall now.
Wow.
But yeah, my kids are 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18. And I oftentimes reference them in this podcast because like I look at them as my team and I use the same process, but in like a parenting setting. And so it's been so effective in helping everyone stay connected for the most part, like any team, you have conflicts and you have situations that arise, and sometimes it takes longer to work through those. But if we just like come back to the foundational process of, how Dr. Lola teaches it and how she's set up the entire system, it's just so effective. So I oftentimes talk about them as my team members because, it's such a wonderful just such a wonderful experience to know this kind of language and be able to work with them in that way. So,
And if I can add, it's so cute because the kids have been using this process for the last 8 years or so, and they have memorized the raw spots, and they were like telling me over the phone yesterday, oh, I had number 10, communicating my needs and getting ignored, hit. And the other says, oh, I had number 2, not being valued, or, for my skill. And it was so cute because they know the language, and it becomes so much easier for them to catch the moments when they feel disconnected.
yeah, I do notice like the awareness is such a big factor to that. And aside from that, I can tell you my secret really quick about like how I look so good. First of all, look at my mom; she's gorgeous and so looks
Good
so young.
genetics. Good genetics.
So that's number one. But also, I always attribute it to my healthy lifestyle. Like, I've never been into drinking. I've never been into doing any extracurricular. I mean, I like to dance and have fun, but I'm like high on life. And I think that's important too, especially from a young age. And this is what's a beautiful thing about this process is like, and just learning about emotions in general is when you have the way to express yourself, you don't look for alternative, ineffective ways. And a lot of times I see it too, because I have teenagers, right? I see it in their friends or friends that they have lost that have gotten into drugs and alcohol and like, just sneaking around and getting addicted to all these things to push down their feelings and to kind of put them to the side and not really bring awareness and light to them. So yeah, I think that I attribute that tremendously to my great looks.
Well, I resonate with that. I decided to start a business about 6 years ago because I thought being a part of corporate America and like working to rise the ranks to become a leader and make this big difference in an organization, I realized that, yeah, I want to make a difference, but I couldn't handle it in corporate. And leaving something that I felt stuck in to start something new where I had autonomy and I could be an entrepreneur and I could make mistakes and trial and error and learn and grow and just be able to experiment. Like, I think I look younger now than I did 6 years
Yeah,
ago. So I think
it's
lifestyle and
amazing.
attitude and dramalessness is a really big part of feeling good and looking good. So, listeners, now you know what to do to feel
Yes.
good and look good. No.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that it's really interesting. Our move from Hawaii was like very quick decision, and we moved like within 15 days. And a lot of people were asking us, we have a pretty big following on social media, and they're like, why are you doing the move? Like, Hawaii is such a great life and all this
Mhm.
stuff, and it's such a great lifestyle. And they really attributed like my children's happiness to the environment that we were living in. But I completely disagreed. Yeah, it's a really great life. It's wonderful. You really feel retired there, but who wants to retire at 30 and 40? I mean, I don't at least. So, and also I noticed like my kids were just feeling more settled and like they had no motivation. It was like it was boring for them and they wanted to be in this like energy that is fast paced and exciting and a lot more opportunities. And the reason why I bring that up too is that you can be in any environment, right? You could be in any environment anywhere in this world, no matter like it could be very high stress or it could be, somewhere on the beach. But if you don't have this process, if you don't have the process to communicate your feelings, your fears, your needs, to know how to connect on a deeper level emotionally with people, you're still going to live this very high stressed lifestyle, right? You're going to still have a lot of drama and a lot of, pain points that come out physically in your body and then show up everywhere else in your life. So I do think that, environment, yeah, it plays a contributing factor, of course, to how our cells function. But I think number one is how are we connecting emotionally? How are we connecting deeply to people in our life? Because that's the most important thing is relationships. Which brings me to my very first question. So you wrote a book. You wrote Measurement and Evaluation on a Shoestring. And I want to know about how did that journey unfold? Like, how did you get there? Was there like I have experience in Nepal and that was like a life-changing moment for you. Did you have like a life-changing, should you had a dream or something? And you're like, oh my God, I gotta write this book. Tell us what happened.
Well, I can say that the reason I started my business was due to being in Bali and having
Oh,
a meeting with a Balinese healer. So we could dive into that because
I love that.
the actual answer to your question is one that I am very proud of and grateful for is that I was asked to write the book by the publisher. What
Mm,
better reason to write a book than that? And it's that simple. I did have to complete the proposal like any author would. But ultimately, the title of the book, the format of the book, it was part of a series. Uh,
mm,
they call it the On a Shoestring series. And while at first I was thinking, do I really want my first book to be part of somebody else's idea and somebody else's, it's not just about me. And then I thought, actually, this is perfect because as a practitioner in the world of education, training, and measurement, I have literally been on a shoestring. So, what more perfect way to express my experiences and help others than by following through with this opportunity that literally landed in my lap? So yeah, that's the short of the long story, or just the short of the short story.
But tell us more about like what was inspiring to you in regards to that. Like, so you mentioned you felt you were on a shoestring. Like, what was there an incident? Was there an experience in your personal life that drew you to that? Because when we're aligned, that's exactly what happens. Things fall into our lap, and it's just like, oh my gosh, of course, because this is the path that we are on, that we're meant to be on. Or so, can you share a little bit more about that?
I think it was writing down my big life list, like probably
Mm.
1 or 2 years before the book deal came. And
Mm-hmm.
on that list, there's a lot of fun things, but one of them was to write a book or more than one. And so I correlating with starting a new business. And as you both know, as entrepreneurs, we in many ways need to be thought leaders. To be a successful entrepreneur, often we want to be able to differentiate our services by demonstrating to the world that our expertise is worth listening to, that we have experiences that can truly help others, and that we are committed to the journey of helping other people achieve their goals. And so for me, it was like writing this book while I didn't get to choose the title and I didn't get to choose the cover or the colors or the format, which most people would be like, why would you do that, Alaina? You should be able to create what you want and bring it into the world. That will be for my second book. But I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity. And I think it was setting the intention long ago as part of my entrepreneurial journey. And
Hmm.
it just fell into place at the right time. And now I am so grateful to have the credibility that comes with a book, to have the chance to organize my thoughts. Actually, writing the book as an exercise really helped me to build some frameworks that I was using as a practitioner but hadn't formalized. And so that, of course,
Mhm.
made it so much easier to help people through speaking and other types of writing and consulting. So, yeah, it couldn't have been better timed. And perhaps it was due to that big life list that I worked on a few years prior.
That's awesome.
Alaina, were you in talent and development in the corporate world?
I was, but I
Uh,
wasn't always. I never went to school to be part of a talent development or corporate learning environment. I went to school because I wanted to be a teacher and I
mhm.
loved studying human behavior. And so for me, getting a doctorate degree in education and human behavior was like, what can I not do with this educational background? And so the truth is, I did a lot of things prior to completing my doctorate degree and after my doctorate degree that I think really set me up for success to write a book that I believe has helped a lot of people, and will hopefully continue to do so as readership goes up. And in the end, I really feel like all the experiences that I've had going into the educational sector and having worked in nonprofits, having been a leader of a team, having now working as an entrepreneur, all those experiences are grateful and useful for where I'm at. But no, I did not start my career with the intention of being in corporate training.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if we have a lot of listeners here that are probably new to you and your work. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and the book? And also, I want to hear more about the context of the shoestring concept.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, tell us more.
Well, about the work that I do. In summary, I call myself a data nerd. And the data component of measurement and evaluation is really where I situate myself. I started the journey of being a teacher by being in the classroom and really leveraging data and observation and feedback to improve. Because, as any new teacher, whether you're in a literal classroom, which for me, I taught English as a foreign language in Mexico. That was my very first ever teaching job. I had to write the curriculum. I gave feedback one-on-one to students, adapted my curricula for the next session, and then from there was in sexual health, doing public health education that was grant funded, and then moved into higher education, doing research in education and human behavior, and then from there in the nonprofit world and corporate. So I've been in so many different places, and the through line I realize only recently is that I'm really good at working with data. I have a data-driven mindset that I've probably always had. If you think about my early experiences as a professional, as a young person even, I was an athlete. And so getting feedback from coaches and peers about how can I improve as a team member? How can I be more competitive? Feedback is data. And that data really helped me to be better at anything that I did. So I always sought out feedback. I always used data and evidence to make decisions in my personal life, my professional life. And so fast forward to today, or rather the work I did in corporate, I realized people weren't using data. They weren't taking advantage of measurement. And it was really just like a jaw-dropping moment, having been in academia and the nonprofit world and in the athletic universe. I was so surprised that people weren't more data literate in the corporate and talent development sector. And so that for me is really the core of the skill set. That if we can think like researchers and we look to data to help us make important decisions, everything else gets easier. And so while the book has the title Measurement and Evaluation on a Shoestring, it's really about how do we leverage data? How do we understand data? How do we think like a researcher to make everything in life easier, whether that's measuring learning outcomes or trying to lose weight? Because the process is the same. What are you trying to do? How are you going to do it? What indicators will you look to improve and incrementally adjust so that you can achieve your goals? And at the end of the day, data is the most powerful asset to do that.
That's so interesting. I was kind of smiling when you were talking about that because I am like the least research. I mean, when I make a decision, I don't like research. I just make a decision based on my own intuition. I'm like, yes, that feels good. Yes, I should. It's like more of an inspired action approach, right? I don't like do the research and see the data. But then I was thinking in my social media accounts and also like even in comparison to our assessment that we have, the TESA, which is like the team emotional safety assessment. I look at all the insights, right? Like we make a post or we have someone take the assessment and we're looking at numbers. We're looking at where are your capabilities? How are you the strongest? Or what numbers hold really well? What are people viewing? What are they interested in learning? You know, that kind of data, because I'm in marketing also, right? So we look at data to see like, what are people more drawn to? What's working, what's not working? So, so it's really interesting to hear that's your approach. So then when you use this research, so you educate people on the importance of research and analytical data to make decisions. Is that correct,
Sort of
Megan?
a yes and. It's actually more of a mindset. And I want to back up to something you said because I think it's important for listeners that I don't gloss over this, that your intuition is also data. So I think
Yes.
when we think about data, common culture pushes us into data is only quantitative, it's only numbers. But at the end of the day, data is any artifact that is useful as an indicator of am I on the right track? Or do I need to make a change? And how do I identify what that change is? And how we feel about something is a really important indicator. Do we have constant gut reactions that show up at certain times in our lives? Leaning into those are data, especially if there's a pattern. And so I think of myself as just like really good at identifying patterns in any kind of data artifact. And so thinking like a researcher is really the opportunity. It's like recognizing that anything we do is an experiment and there's no guarantee in the outcome. And so, what sort of data indicators can we monitor and track that are going to help us know if we're moving in the right direction? And so, I love using the example of weight loss because everyone at some point in their life is going to want to lose weight. Doesn't matter who you are, you're going to think about it, you're probably going to try to lose weight. And so, when we think about what data do we use to know if we're hitting our goals or not, most people automatically think it's that number on the scale. And the truth is, that's not even close to being the correct answer. It's one of many different data artifacts that we could look at to know if we're moving in the right direction. And so I'm encouraging people to think beyond the numbers or to think alongside the numbers and to really think deeply about, if I'm trying to achieve a goal, what artifact would I look to help me know if I've achieved that goal or not? And so going back to the weight loss example, how do I feel in the pants that used to be my favorite? Like maybe my weight on the scale hasn't changed, but maybe because I've been lifting weights, all of a sudden I fit into my clothes differently again. Or maybe
Yeah.
my energy level is different. Or
Mhm.
maybe it's my waist size, or there's numerous things. It's even, how do I feel when I look in the mirror, right? There's a number of artifacts that can help us to monitor and measure if we're accomplishing or moving in the right direction toward a goal. And so I encourage people to think it's not just about the numbers. Those are important. And even qualitative things can become numbers. In fact, many assessments, as Dr. Lola, you probably know, your assessment probably has some qualitative component to it. And we can translate that into a number so that we can have a more standardized approach to analyze our data. But data can be anything. And it's up to us to decide what's the most realistic and reasonable artifact to look at to help us know if we're moving in the right direction. It's like really that simple.
That's so awesome. I'm going to give Dr. Lola the floor in a second, but I want to just come back to what you said, because I thought that was so good. As you were speaking, I was listening, I realized, like, I don't know if you've seen the process that Dr. Lola put together, or if you've seen any of her work. Like, the form is a really important component to the process that we use in working with different teams and conflict resolution. And we always reference back to this form because it's like a very simple step-by-step process. You follow the form. Yes, emotions can get complicated, overwhelming, and it can get really deep, but you follow the form and exactly what you're talking about, except we are just removing the numbers part of it. But what we're doing is we're bringing that awareness to the pattern that occurs within you when you get triggered in a conflict. And then you have these specific raw spots that get triggered, to become aware of what those raw spots are. And then you have those automatic protective thoughts and behaviors that happen that we also want to become aware of. Because I think what we're saying is the same thing. You using that research data, which is exactly what we do in the process. We are researching how we respond in conflicts when we have a situation in the workplace. That way, when we have that research, we're like, wow, we could bring awareness to that research. And then we can recognize what's happening with us. So then we can make the adjustments and the necessary changes to create a different result, right? So if we have this pattern and we have this conflict, now all of a sudden we see it in the form. And then we're like, wow, this is what's happening. We're getting the same results if we continue that same pattern, right? But we can actually shift that pattern using that research data and create completely different environment and different results. So I think that's so awesome that you have that approach, and how amazing that it really just complements exactly what we're doing. We like to say, well, Dr. Lola taught me this, but she always says, like, we are like investigators. We are investigating the patterns that take place when we get into a conflict, right? So you still have this complete mindset shift when you are investigating, because you're not looked at like, oh, you're a bad person, you have all these problems, you should be ashamed of yourself. This is like we take that entire element out of the process, and we're really making it more research. Like, let's just see what happens. Let's just uncover what's going on with you. Let's just really dive deep into what your behaviors are, so we can see what the pattern is creating, what results are creating. And do we want those results? Most of the time it's no, right? Because then the work environment is not thriving, and then the sales are down and all this stuff. So that's really, really interesting. I'll give the floor to you, Mom.
Well, Alaina and Polina, I love your conversation. I could just watch you continue. This is so fun to watch you to get so excited about this. But Alaina, as you were talking about different ways of looking of how to measure something, it reminded me of a conversation I just had with a director of this company, and he was sharing with me that they have about 40% turnover rate. And for their industry, it's very high, considers to be like double that what is kind of a norm. And he was saying, Lola, I'm looking for an assessment that will help me to select the right people because I don't get it why these people are leaving. We're hiring, we're spending time of training them, and then they leave. And I said, have you ever thought about assessing the culture instead of the people, right? Because you can select the best people in the world, and if you are putting them in this toxic culture, nobody's going to want to be at. And the people start to behave that culture, what culture represents. And he said, I never thought about that. Because in our assessment, when we measure the team emotional safety, is all about how do we interact with each other? What our relationships look like? Do I feel safe in my relationship with my team members? Do I feel safe with my manager? Can I rely on them? Can I, share my vulnerability with them? Will they be there for me? So our relationships is a representative of culture. So when I was talking to him, I don't think people realize, yeah, you're spending so much time thinking that it's the outside people who are the problem, where the culture, where there is relationships, and you don't know how to repair relationships, create that the environment where people can't really survive. They can't thrive. They just want to leave and they just want to run from. So I like that, Alaina, you are bringing different options. It's not the only data is the scale, the number on the scale. It's other things that contribute to that weight loss.
Yeah. And the more diverse perspectives that we can add as we investigate, as you say, the dynamics of what's going on, the more powerful the indicators will have, the more reliable the data will be because it's looking at the same thing from different perspectives and giving us a full picture of why is something occurring and what can we do to make a difference in that area. So, I mean, some of the research 101 is data triangulation. Anytime that you're doing a study, you're investigating something, we want to have 3 different sources or perspectives on that same thing, and that gives us a more reliable outcome in terms of the data. And that's something that I'm frustrated by generally in our culture, that this is taking the conversation in a totally different direction. So I'll be brief in case we don't want to go down this rabbit hole. But in the world today, we are very polarized. We are black versus white. We are red versus blue. We're so incredibly polarized. And that is actually making things in the world more dysfunctional because we need diverse perspectives, and there's never going to be just one or the other. There's always going to be a lot of things happening in the middle. And so where are the other perspectives that we need to make informed decisions, to make change? Typically in our culture, we lean on one data set. We lean on one source of information because we're more comfortable with that, or because it's just what we know, or because we're following the algorithms of social media who are feeding us more of the things that we're already clicking on, so we're not getting exposed to other perspectives. But at the end of the day, if we're only being fed one perspective or one source of data, we'll never have a complete picture to be able to make informed decisions. And so it's the same in research. Anyway, sorry for the rabbit hole. Feel free to cut that out, but I think it's a powerful thing.
I don't want to cut that out actually, because this is so interesting that you said that. One of the things that we teach is in any conflict that you have, like a lot of times what we see, and this is very normal, it actually goes beyond workplace relationships. It goes to relationships and everywhere in your life. People tend to stay in what we call the content of the conflict. Okay. When we stay in the content of the conflict, then people aren't actually able to connect on an emotional level. If they're not able to connect on an emotional level, then we have in our brain, what happens is the amygdala, the part of the brain that senses whether we are, in danger or not, it hijacks the prefrontal cortex. My mom does a great job at teaching like the anatomy aspect of the brain and how that exactly happens. But when that happens, we cannot make clear decisions. We cannot, because we get hijacked, which creates a lot of fog in our brain. We get confused. We have difficulty making decisions. And I really think that's why the culture has turned into a more polarized environment, and where it is only the black and the white and the red pill or the blue pill, like you can just pick one or the other, because that is what happens when we don't have the capacity to be emotionally connected. When we're not emotionally connected, we don't have that large range of options, that diverse opportunities that gives us that ability to see all the different options. And I see it so clearly. I know, having 5 children, it's really opened my eyes to understanding how like the human brain is formed, and how children become adults, in the way of thinking and the way of resolving conflicts. And it's so interesting to see when my kids get stuck and they're unable to connect on an emotional level, they do, only in their mind, very difficult for them to make decisions. And it's typically black or white. But all of a sudden, you reach to them through this process that we use in the workplace on an emotional level. All of a sudden, there are thousands of options that come to them. And it's really interesting just to see. A lot of times I hear also, when we work with different companies, people can say things like, oh, I'm not creative, or, I can't really make those decisions, or, I don't have the talents or the tools. All of that comes from not accessing that emotional part of you. When we can access that emotional and get deeply connected in that emotional way, we have that full range of creativity, imagination, possibility, anything is possible from that perspective. So I think it's really interesting. I agree that in a very, environment, society that is not emotionally connected, that is not focused and driven on creating that deep emotional connection in all of our relationships, from the workplace all the way to our home place and everything in between. Yeah, we do have a very polarized system here. But when we do integrate that aspect of being emotionally connected, then all of a sudden, exactly what you're saying is having this wide range of research and options. And, there's so many more ways to look at data. Then all of a sudden people are open, right? It's the same thing when people are open to learning new things, open to, accepting all this different data, open to changing their mindset, because they have that securely attached experience and relationship. So it settles the amygdala. The amygdala then releases the prefrontal cortex. Then the prefrontal cortex has the ability to think clearly, and we can make decisions. We can see all options, and life just becomes so much better. So I love that you have that perspective and that option, that perspective in your book, that you can really come at this in so many different ways, like opening doors in your mind, to so many more options.
It's one thing I'll say about the book is that if anyone is listening and is in the world of corporate learning and development or talent development, you're probably only familiar with a certain model or two to measure outcomes of your programs, being Kirkpatrick model and the ROI methodology. And those models aren't bad. All models have their flaws. All models have their ideal use cases. But my approach to measurement is really model agnostic. It's think like a researcher. What are you trying to do and why? What's the change you're trying to facilitate? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And how are you going to go about doing that? What evidence are you using to feel confident, like the program, the intervention, the change intervention, the mission is going to make a difference? And what data will you monitor? Or what signals, what indicators? Don't use data if data feels overwhelming to you, but it's the same idea. What are you going to look at that helps you understand if you're moving in the right direction? Because we all know that sometimes we miss the mark with intervention. Sometimes the program, the initiative, it's not the right one. And so wouldn't you rather know that you're not moving in the right direction and have some insight to help you figure out what's not quite working and why, and then make a change before, the traditional models say do an impact investigation after the program is over. But the reality is there are indicators during the program if it's moving in the right direction. And wouldn't you rather know now rather than wait until you've invested all the money and time into the program to find out only later that it didn't have as great of an impact. And so
Yeah.
those are some of the mindset shifts that I'm encouraging our industry and anybody in leadership development to start considering, because it will make a huge difference in your work.
That's awesome. One of the things that we teach too, like we were doing we had that what's at the ATD conference, we were both speaking about some specific topics on communicating differently. And one of the things is we did reference the number of hours people spent on conflicts and dealing with conflicts in the workplace. And then if we just take all those hours and you multiply by how much you're actually paying the managers to deal with those conflicts, it ended up being like, what did we say? It was like $440,000 a year that companies could be saving had they have had the correct process, a process that actually could be implemented into the workplace that actually created a thriving environment. They had the data, they had the research, they were able to fully integrate it into the company and how much money they would save. So I like that research aspect too. Like, show me how to make more money. That's a good one, and that I think is very important for companies, but you're right. It's the ROI, right? Return on investment. And it's also like, is what we're doing working, and how do we assess it? Actually, the TESSA assessment, what we do, or I say TESSA assessment, but it's actually TESSA. We do typically have the teams do the assessment at the beginning of the training, and then we will do the training and have them take the assessment at the end of the training. And even in our experience, and Dr. Lola can add to this, like we see such an improvement, like the entire scale moves closer to the entire team being emotionally safer in their environment, because they also become aware of what is happening. They didn't even know what was happening before that was affecting them in a negative way. So
Yeah, I found that most of the time when I was in HR and working as a CFO or in even the board level position, we have all these assessments, but then what do you do with them? Like, how do you even improve? And you have all these different trainings you think are going to help, and somehow, from what I have gathered, from my experience going to, Speed of Trust or 7 Habits of Highly Effective Managers, or all the Franklin Covey, I remember that was our company to go to, was all the training, is that it helped for a little bit. Like you get inspired, you read the book, and you suddenly shift to the behavior. But then after a while, you get into your own pattern, or the pattern takes over our conversations, and then you're back again at the same ground level as you were just 3 months or 6 months ago. So, Alaina, in your work, how do you help companies to identify what are they supposed to do to improve those data numbers?
Well, I think it goes back to the perspectives conversation that we were having earlier, and really deeply understanding what's the problem. And so your example earlier about recruiting and retention, we have a 40% turnover rate. Is it the people, or is it the organizational culture? Could be a little bit of both. And so do we really fully understand the problem from multiple perspectives, from managers' perspective, from the participants themselves, from the stakeholders' perspective? So I have in my book my own version of a return on expectations approach. And so my book is really, it was Rob Brinkerhoff said it best. It's a smorgasbord term used mostly by people of a certain generation. I'm bringing it back. No, a smorgasbord of approaches to measuring that are all based on what are your challenges, what are your needs, what are your goals. As I mentioned, I'm model agnostic, so there's going to be a time and a place for a certain approach. And if you're struggling with getting stakeholders to have trust and rapport and partnership with your learning function, the return on expectations methodology is a really, really useful one. But it's so simple, Dr. Lola. To your point about, how do we approach measurement? Getting and understanding those needs and doing programs correctly, the best thing that we can do is leverage the return on expectations approach, which is first and foremost identifying who are your stakeholders. And that's not just the business leaders. The stakeholders, I have 4 categories of stakeholders. One, of course, is your C-suite, your decision maker, who's putting money on the table to invest in your initiative. What do they expect from the program? What do they need the program or the investment to do? They're going to have a unique perspective on that. Then on the other end of the spectrum, all the way at the other end of the spectrum, you have the benefactor of the program. That's not the participant or the learner or the employee. It is, for example, in leadership. The benefactor of most leadership programs isn't the leader that participates in the program. It's their supervisee. It's the employee that's going to have a better experience at work because their leader is better in their leadership role. So there's a huge missed opportunity to investigate the benefactors of our program's success. Those could be your customers. Those could be your students if we train teachers to be better. It could be the parents. Who are the benefactors of the program's success? Not the participant. But if the participant's behavior change is successful, who gets the benefit of that? I want to know what they need from the program, what they expect to come out of the program. And then in the middle of that spectrum, you've got, of course, the manager. What does a manager expect? What do they need the program or the investment to do? And then, of course, you have the direct participant. What do they need? What's their experience? What's their expectation? If the program is successful, what are they going to have on the other end of that? What support do they need? And getting that documentation, what do people need and what do they expect from our investment in training and development in a specific area? Those perspectives will really help us to design an effective program and, of course, to measure if we got a return on those expectations or not.
Wow, I need a notepad.
You're in luck. This is being recorded. No.
I need to write all this down. But the book, so we're gonna just wrap it up here because we are just hitting our time. I want to just ask a couple more things. If someone was new to your process and your book, like what are some of the steps they've read your book? How can they start integrating, or what would you recommend would be like the first few steps they could take to integrate what you teach?
Well, like I said, I'm model agnostic. The biggest thing that I think would help people is to find a way to not be so afraid of data. As you sort of suggested in the beginning of our conversation, you said, so you do work with like data and analytics, and those two words are terrifying for most people.
Yes.
It just is what it is. Very few of us get excited about data and analytics. So find a way to get interested and open yourself up to looking at, call it evidence, call it thinking like a researcher, call it trial and error and experimentation, whatever is safe and useful for you. But thinking like everything I do, there's no guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
There's no promises. You might invest $1 million in like the most successful business case program ever, and it's got all the documentation behind it, but it's still just a hypothesis that that program is going to make a difference in your organization, or that that weight loss program is going to help you get the results that you want. It's just a hypothesis. It's just a resource. There's no guarantee. So thinking like that, and having those conversations with our stakeholders, hey, there's no guarantee this is going to get the exact outcome. We'll probably get close. Maybe we'll even surpass it. But what do we need to be tracking and monitoring on a regular basis to know if we're moving toward that direction or not? And it can be simple as, how do I feel? What do I expect? What do I need? There's all kinds of data points or data artifacts or, smoke signals, if you want to think of it like that. There's all kinds of things we could look to help us monitor, are we moving in the right direction? And then cumulatively, did we move in the right direction after the initiative is over? So what is that for you? How can you get excited about data? What do you have to do to change your mind so you're not intimidated and overwhelmed? Because it's actually quite simple. What are you doing and why? And what evidence, data, insights, artifacts are going to help you know if you're moving in that direction or not? So it's like a pulse check. Okay, I'm going to look. Polina, you mentioned marketing. What do I look at in my marketing initiatives to know if my content is hitting in the way that I hope it would? I look at likes and comments. I look at impressions. I look at click-through rates. These are really simple things that help me know if like what I'm doing is working. I even have a poll at the end of my newsletter that says, how well did these resources resonate? And I have very intentional options that say I'm just reading for pleasure, that say I can use this someday, I can use this immediately, or this isn't relevant. And of course, I want to see that most people are selecting I can use this immediately or I can use it someday. And then when I look at my posts and the ones that have this isn't relevant overwhelmingly, I'm like, got it. Now I know that that kind of content doesn't resonate with my audience and I want to, evolve away from that in the future. So, what are some of those things that you can look to that already exist, like LinkedIn metrics if you're doing LinkedIn for marketing? Or what are some simple things you can put in place yourself, like a poll at the end of every piece of your weekly writing that asks people how well things resonate or how useful it is? That can help you know that you're moving in the right direction. And those simple things can make a world of difference and make you feel better about using data versus feeling intimidated or overwhelmed.
It's so funny. I was thinking, I just recently started working out at the gym over here. And my mom was doing private training sessions before she moved to Florida. And so she had like some extra private training sessions. So she moved him over to me. And I'm so grateful for that, by the way, Mom. But I strongly dislike the personal trainer. Like I like him as a person, right? But I'm suffering, right? When I do the training session. So I told him today, like, I really don't like you, Dylan. You're like an awesome person, but I just like suffering so much, right? But when I first had the session with him, I like numbers because I want to get an A plus, like I'm like an overachiever. I want to be like at the top. I want to like do 100%, 100 grams of protein. I want to like be like the best, whatever. So in that way, I think that's why I'm so good with marketing because I like looking at, I didn't even think of it until you started talking about it, but I like looking at numbers because I'm like, am I getting an A? And so today I had a session with him this morning. And so he's like, I'm going to check I have to like track all my food now. And I have to make sure I'm drinking water and oh my God, and all this creatine stuff. And so and he's telling me and he's like, how good do you think you're going to do, in the first session? And I was like, oh, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to be like A+ student. I'm going to do exactly everything you tell me. And then I tell, but I'm looking at these numbers every single day. Right. And then I'm going to, no, I don't feel like I need to lose weight, but I want to work out and build muscle. And so then I had the session this morning and he's like looking at and I'm like, Dylan, I'm not like the app says I need to hit like 2,000 calories for me to gain. I'm trying to gain like a few pounds of muscle mass. I'm not hitting it exactly. It's in the red zone. It's telling me that it's like you're getting a D minus on the report. And I'm telling him how stressed I am that it's not like an A+, and he's like, no, you're just only supposed to hit 1,500. It's okay. You're doing really good. Like your protein's really good. You're taking your creatine. I'm so proud of you, But in my mind, that's what drives me to look at data, right? Like for me, I get motivated, inspired because I'm like, I need an A+, right? So I can only imagine, like if people are fearful, just to go back to what you were saying, they're fearful of data. They're fearful of measurements. That's probably because they're fearful of failing, right? If they can't, so their fear of failure means that they're not good enough, right? Which translates to them not being good enough for their job, which translates to them maybe the risk of losing their job or not fulfilling their duties, which brings on a lot of shame. And this we talk a lot about in our conflicts, and we see it so clearly across all board directors and employees and business relationships, how many people feel like they are failing and their fear of failing in their job. It's not just here too, because like I talk about failing as a daughter, like in relation to my father or my mom, that is so prevalent, I think. And the way that we're raised is how can your parents be proud of you? How can they like be acceptable of everything that you're doing? And so I think that is really important too to note here is that recognizing what is stopping you from wanting to look at those numbers? What's stopping you from wanting to be, wanting to do the research, to understand what is happening, in your work? What are you doing? It's not that, oh my gosh, my video didn't do so well, or oh my gosh, I missed my calorie mark and I'm such a terrible person and I failed and I should be so ashamed of myself, right? Which is oftentimes where people go. And I think that I think would be great to also coincide understanding the process of really And I haven't read your book yet, but now I'm intrigued. But do you talk about that at all? Like if you do feel like there's blocks and people are struggling with, understanding why market research and research in general and data is important analysis and stuff, do you go into that and what people can do to really work through that?
Yep, absolutely. It's kind of what the whole book is about. The first chapter talks about the 6 different things that are like the common blockers that research suggests, and my own informal studies have shown that, like, fear of getting it wrong, lack of expertise. And the biggest one is that our organizations aren't supportive. Our organizational
Mhm.
culture, as Dr. Lola suggested, is a very strong predictor of anything that we do. And if data is used in a punitive way, then people will be
Mhm.
terrified of data because they're going to be terrified that their job's going to be lost if they're not showing up in the expected ways. Whereas in some organizational cultures, everything is a hypothesis and we are innovating, and data is a signal, not necessarily a thing that we use to punitively correct people or make them feel bad. It's a thing that we use to improve, and it's helpful. It's an asset. It's not a liability. And so the organizational culture is one of the biggest barriers, or optimal positive things that helps us be more
Mhm.
data minded. So for any listener, I encourage you to really reflect. And maybe you don't have to reflect too hard. Maybe you know that your organizational culture, because you probably feel it intuitively, like it's really difficult to ask my stakeholder for numbers. They don't want to give me their numbers, which probably means they're afraid of failure or looking bad too, right? Everything is interconnected. So if you're in an organization where it's not very data driven or data minded, you will struggle a little bit more. That doesn't mean you can't still blossom your own data practice and data emphasis. You just have to be a little more creative and innovative, and maybe not expect your stakeholder to be supportive, but find support in other ways, like myself and other members of the L&D community. Read our books. There's a lot of amazing free communities of practice. I host one every Monday of the month. And yeah, there's a lot of amazing resources that can help people if your organizational environment is not an optimal source of support.
Do you have children?
I have a beautiful chocolate lab.
Okay.
Count.
Because I was gonna just add, I was thinking like as you were saying that people, if my kids are, and they just started a new school because we moved from Hawaii. They were at Waldorf before for like 4 or 5 years, and they don't have a grading system.
Mm.
Right? But if we think about like where did the fear of failure for numbers and assessment analytics come from? It's
It's
like
that
the
A
grading.
plus that you want so
Yeah,
badly. Yeah.
exactly. It's literally the grading system, right? Because they go to
Mhm.
school and if they get F's or D's, they get in trouble, right? The kids typically, not my family, but typically kids get punished for getting bad grades, right? They can't go out, they get their phone taken away or whatever. So it's really interesting, maybe for those of you who are listening, maybe had some situations in your childhood. I got excited talking about getting an A+, because that was a really big deal in my family. Like, yes, you should get all good grades, right? And if you don't, then you're not as good of a student, or you're not as good of a, child or whatever. So that's really interesting to also kind of bring attention to, where did the fear come from? And just to bring awareness and light to it, I think is such a huge step. It don't necessarily means you don't have to do anything to it with it, but you can just bring light to that and be like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. Okay, now I can shift my mindset, right? Now I can open that door because I'm not failing or I'm not a bad student. So,
And I
Mama,
do
I know.
have a chapter that the first chapter of the book talks about my own childhood story, about how
Okay.
I thought that I was bad at math because
Yeah.
of a teacher that didn't give me any kind of accolades in school for reasons that I won't go into today. Turns out I'm actually really, really good at math and I understand it conceptually, but maybe just don't show my work right because I get it up here, but I'm impatient to write down how I got to the answer. I could just tell you the answer. And we don't have to go into how our educational system is failing kids, but there's opportunities for improvement there. But I think you're right. We all have a story of how somebody told us something once, like you're a bad speller, you're not attractive, you're bad at math. And those are just stories that we hold on to that
Mhm.
aren't actually true. And so you're absolutely right that being able to go back to the original moments where you feel insecure or overwhelmed with data or math and be able to name, oh, it was my middle school math teacher that made me feel like I'm not worthy or I don't deserve to be in roles managing data. How unfair and untrue that is for me. And
Mhm.
so every one of us has something like that. And yeah, giving some awareness to it and then being able to name that that's not necessarily true today is a really powerful opener to getting over the overwhelm or the fear of working with data.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Mom, do you want to add anything before we?
Well, I think thank you. I think this conversation was so fun. The time went so fast. I cannot believe it. It's been an hour
I know.
that we've been talking. I really appreciate, Alaina, that you are sharing. And Polina, I love that you're back and having such
Yay.
fun experiences and good questions. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alaina. We so very much
Where can they
appreciate.
find you? Where can
Yes.
people find you?
Yep.
I
We so
have a
appreciate.
website. It's very easy. It's dralaina.com. And on that website, you can find my weekly newsletter, which I don't like calling it a newsletter because it's actually not about news. It's about tips and tricks to improve impact measurement. It's on Substack. You can find my book and you can find more about my consulting practice. And most importantly, that community of practice that I mentioned, where we meet the first Monday of every month. It's free. It is the most amazing source of support. The peers and myself as an expert guide people in like real life challenges, and everybody just listens and gets so much out of it. So I host those the first Monday of every month, and all of those details you can find at dralaina.com and flipping through some of those core tabs on the homepage.
And Dr. Alaina is spelled DRALAINA.com.
Right.
And I'm so happy to hear that you're on Substack. I was just telling my mom she needs to get on Substack because she's also a writer. You know, she's an author to many books, and
Mm-hmm.
Substack is phenomenal. So thank
Absolutely.
you very much for joining us. And for those of you who are listening or watching, thank you so much. We so very much appreciate you. I am so happy to be back. And remember, this is the Leader in You podcast. We are on every single week. And if you need help, if you need support with conflicts at the workplace, you know where to find us. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's a joy to share these podcasts with you. Be sure to check out our previous podcasts and subscribe to join us at our next podcast of The Leader in You, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. Until then, be well and be focused on your relationships. We'll see you soon.